All right. What is going on? I am here with David Murray. David and I connected on Instagram. And this is one of the beautiful things about the internet. I'm always talking about this. Like people talk about, oh, this, that is bad, is this. I'm like, man, you know how many awesome people that I've gotten to meet like yourself because of the internet, and you make these connections. So it's like whatever you focus on. And so I was talking to David last week, and I was like, man, we got to get on the podcast and just share this conversation. So why don't you just I have a few things that I want to ask you and get your insights and experience on, but give us a little you know autobiography of who you are, what you're
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Thanks for having me on the Strength Method. It's a pleasure. So I'm based in Maryland, DC area, born and raised here. I'm a local small-time elected official on the school board in Prince George's County, Maryland. I was a special education teacher in DC, working now at American University and basically trying to solve the problem of teaching kids to read. Believe it or not, somehow in America, only about 1 in 3 kids can read on grade level. And, that really dramatically impacts people's lives and the opportunity to be able to do whatever it is you want to do post-secondary. You need to be able to read to do just the most basic things in life, from menus to phone bills, anything you can imagine. And so poured a lot of time into that. And outside of the education space, I love fitness, nutrition, taking care of myself. And, I think that's how we connected. You post, some really awesome content on Instagram. It's easy to digest and adds a lot of value. And, when you have that piece locked in, it makes it very easy. You're like running circles around people with your abilities to kind of excel in life because you just have more like energy and vitality. And so I think, fitness and nutrition is a big key to that.
And uh one of the other things that was interesting to me, or that I want, and why one of the reasons I wanted you to come on and share is because you're doing important things, and you're this whole thing about being busy and not having stuff, and yet you've figured it out as well. And we talk about it, it's like how simple it is. And so, that's one of the things that, I wanted you to touch on as well, is because like we were just talking a few seconds ago before we started, of like, unfortunately, people never realize their potential, which also goes in hand in hand of like why is it important for, kids to be able to learn how to read and write. And to me, that's the essence of communicate. If you can't communicate and articulate what you feel and what you think, you kind of like you limit yourself. And so that's super important. And I always, I'm very appreciative of people who are working with, kids and young people. One of my favorite quotes is like, it's easier to build strong children than to fix broken adults. And so that's super important. But you know, why don't you just like share some of the things that you're working on, and then I how my conversation, it goes all over the place. So who knows
Yeah.
where we end up? But like,
Great.
start off with like some of the stuff that you're working on that's important to you right now.
Yeah, it really varies. We can talk about any number of things. I kind of go through phases where I really just dive deep into stuff and I'm fascinated by it. For a while, I mean, I still really do love languages. I was fascinated with languages. I learned Spanish to a decent level. And that's kind of another thing. Like Americans are like, don't think we can learn languages. We're not wired for it. It's impossible. Although other places around the world, it's common, expected to speak two, three, four languages. So I went to Spain, through Latin America a bit, learned Spanish. I learned French during COVID through Zoom. I have
Okay.
like some French speaking family in Canada that I've never known too well. I reached out to them. Um, Learned French when I was at home and couldn't go out into the world. So languages really fascinate me. Been spending a lot of time thinking about, I'm finishing up a master's in literacy right now. I thought going back to school for a long time, but now I'm kind of wrapped up in the higher ed space since I'm working there. I'm thinking about applying to some doctoral programs in the fall. And I really don't know what the future holds. I'm just
Dude,
kind of
that's
exploring everything.
well, let's just start. So first of all, let's just start with the shared interest that we kind of met about over, which was, shout out to Ben Patrick of ATG and Knees Over Toes guy, because because of him is how we kind of connected over his community and whatnot. But like this guy is in phenomenal shape. Like if you look at his Instagram, like dude, you're jacked. Like you're in phenomenal shape. So first question for you is just like, share how you make this, how you accomplish this, because it's important to see, like you said about the languages in other countries, that's not even a thing. Like everybody knows multiple languages. But over here, we kind of live and grow up and it's like, oh, it's so hard to learn a language and blah, blah, blah. So then that's your reality.
Yeah.
So with fitness, like, share your story with fitness and like, you said it was only, a few years back where you kind of cracked the code. So
Yeah. You're absolutely right with fitness. Man, we're in a scary place as a country where like when I was like in my most leanest, people were thinking they're like, this guy's unhealthy. Like, it wasn't like bodybuilding, like level low body fat, like, but America's just kind of like so out of shape. It's normalized to be
yeah,
out of shape. That's just kind of what the expectation is. But I really owe the majority of the credit to Greg O'Gallagher and Kino Body. Familiar
shout
with
out
him?
King Body.
Dude, that guy is a genius. And he kind of breaks it down into a way that's not very time intensive and that people can get into and set habits. I think being able to stick to something is huge, right? So it's got to be something that you can do, like to do, and want to do for the rest of your life. Because if it's just for 3 months, or if it's just for a goal, like you'll get there, you'll crash, you'll go on and off of it. So you really have to make it sustainable. And so for me, that was like 3 workouts a week of maybe an hour, 10,000 steps a day, and tracking calories. But for a person that hasn't done any of that before, it's all really foreign. It takes a while to understand what calories are and what macros are and why you got to hit this protein amount. Intermittent fasting was really helpful. I don't think, as I've read more research about it, there's any real magic behind it, but just for me, the magic behind it when I'm like really trying to get lean is it just restricts eating. Like I'm drinking coffee, I'm going about my day, I'm busy, I'm working. And
Yep.
so by the time it's nighttime, I might be at 0 calories. It's
Yep.
going to be very difficult for me to overeat, especially when I lead with protein. Even a day like today, I was just busy. And so I just had like a scoop of whey all day and that's it. Like when we finish, I'll have a New York strip steak,
Yeah.
but it's going to be pretty impossible to go over calories today.
It's tough. So then you weren't always in this good of shape. So like, what was it like growing up? How was, uh, what was kind of your story? Because like I shared my story all the time. I was like, I'm not same as you, like you said earlier, like I'm not genetically gifted. And the thing is you don't need to be. Like physiology is the same for everybody. I was just obsessed, like I was telling you, I was like, oh, I just want abs. I would watch all the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, like Stallone, Bruce. I was like, just want abs so girls will like me. But
Definitely.
what was it like for you growing up? Like, and then what was kind of the struggles? And then so Kino Body was the first thing that kind of clicked and like,
Yeah.
okay, like I get this.
Yeah, my like first job out of college, I was like messing around on YouTube and saw one of his ads, and for whatever reason it just kind of motivated me to give it a try. I think just not having like a plan and just not having anything to follow is a big part of the challenge. It's very difficult to like stumble in all of these things yourself. Like it's much easier to follow a mentor, a coach, whatever you call it, who has already done it. Like I mean, that's true for so many things in life, but it makes things so much easier. And yes, I mean, for myself growing up, I played sports. I was kind of like looking back at it, I was like skinny fat. Like I looked at old pictures, I'm like, man, my cheeks were huge. Like I didn't even realize at the time like how kind of out of shape I was, but just kind of lacked knowledge, didn't know anything about, total daily maintenance calories, didn't know anything about eating protein, didn't know what to do in a gym. And so really just kind of lacked a plan and a vision for a long time. And yeah.
Yeah, and the thing was always like, this is how I always was like, there was always guys who were in phenomenal shape. Even I remember very vividly, like we were playing eighth grade basketball, and we just got whooped by this team, and like their entire these are eighth graders, and these kids were just like jacked, and I was like, what the, like, how is this even possible? And so then whenever you would try to go and get help, or back in those early days of YouTube, I don't know how old are you?
30.
Oh, so we're right around the same. I'm 35, but like back in the early days of YouTube, what you would see is like just crazy motivational stuff. Like, you know who Greg Plitt is?
Greg Plitt.
Yeah.
I'll have to look him up.
Look him up. Greg Plitt, rest in peace. He passed away a while ago. But he was like jacked out of his mind. Just he was a former like military, but then he transitioned into like fitness modeling, and he was like everywhere. And he was one of the early guys on YouTube. But I remember watching this thing. He had chains hanging off of him. He's yelling and screaming. He's like, "This is what you gotta do," blah, blah, blah. Like all this crazy shit. And I was like, I can't do that. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is gonna work. And I would go, and like some of my teammates were in phenomenal shape, and then they would do this stuff, and I'm like, this hurts. Like I can't do this. I can't do what you're doing. And because they didn't really understand it as well. They just, some people are just, naturally in better shape. And so it was like for a long time, probably like 9, 10 years, like I was just no, I was skinny fat, like not strong.
Didn't
And
want to take the shirt off in the locker room.
ever, dude, when they used to be like shirts and skins, I was like, please let me be shirts. Let me be shirts. Like you want to be a teenager and like have love handles, but you're skinny, and then like, whatever. I couldn't wait to put my shirt back on, man. Like it
Yeah.
was not fun.
Yeah.
But the perception was how it is. The perception is it has to be so difficult in order
Yeah.
to get any type of result.
Right.
Uh,
Right. The inverse point of what you were saying about genetics, you probably have had the same experience. So many of those people that I knew now from high school, the star athletes, whatever it might be, people who just had better genetics than others, so many of them, the difference between 18 and 30, 35 is stark. I mean, some of them they don't look very good now. So like, it's not, it really is actually like your long-term habits. Like maybe back then they were more active, but like as folks get older, move less, eat more, like they're not looking so great anymore. So it really is about like habits in the long term.
yeah, and the true understanding, which is like, if you have an understanding of the principles, then you can make any method work. And then then the best route is pick the simplest, easiest method, because the results are going to be the same, if not better, because you're not like stressed out about, oh, I need to do hour and a half workout every day. I need to eat, 6 meals or whatever, BS that people think. Um, so what was the Kino body experience like? I always loved Greg. He was also one of the earlier fitness. I would say he's like the second generation fitness YouTubers. But what was that experience like? How, and because I remember the first time I got abs. This was like 2009, eight. I joined a CrossFit, and I was like, oh shit, I got abs. My shirt was never on. I was like,
Yeah.
let's please do shirts and skins. But what was that whole experience like?
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty easy to get into. So I think he makes stuff that like the average person can potentially stick with. So, a lot of fitness stuff, bodybuilding stuff, it always gets into these really difficult movements, movements that now I like and that I see you do, like squatting and deadlifting. For years, I didn't do any of that. His programs are kind of just built on like building out like an ideal men's physique, and that's heavy incline barbell presses, weighted pull-ups, dips. So still good movements, but not necessarily as difficult to get into. And like I said, just 3 times a week, a couple big kind of gross motor movements of 2, 3 sets. So it was something that was easy to stick to. You couldn't say you can't find time to go every other day or even just 2 days a week. That made it easy, but a lot of teaching around kind of nutrition too, around the importance of protein, intermittent
Yeah.
fasting, stuff that seems basic now, but to somebody who didn't know anything about anything, I mean, I was learning a ton. I didn't know that protein had 4 calories per gram and fat had 6, and what is it, carbs have 4 too. It's very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, dude. And this is an important thing of like those movements are familiar, everybody's done them. And so, and I actually, when we start out, I always tell people like, look, it almost right now, it doesn't even matter what workout you do. Like the only thing that matters, we need to build this one thing at a time. And so we just focus on those things. Hey, fats have 9 calories, carbs have 4 calories, protein has 4, alcohol has 7. Like if you need to know these things before you start, like this is your foundation. Which I'm very interested in the language thing because my wife is Mexican and I have been saying I'm gonna learn, like I can understand
Oh, you
Spanish.
gotta learn.
Dude, I'm like, dude, you gotta get it together. I can understand it. I can get by, but I can't speak fluently, like, that in the way that I would want to. And
Yeah.
so, I'm interested in like what things, and it's interesting that you brought that up. And I was actually just looking at your thing that you speak multiple languages. You know who Mike Dunn is?
No,
So Mike Dunn is on Instagram. He is one of the best shooting coaches in the world.
I
And
might follow him actually.
yeah.
I might
And
follow him, yeah.
okay, yeah. So Mike Dunn is a good friend of mine, and he messaged me, or he posted some things like he was looking for an audio only language course. And I sent him, who Michelle Thomas is? He's like one of the godfathers of language teaching. He passed away a long time ago, but his program is conversational. So it's like how people actually learn language, and so I dabbled in that. It is very good. I need to reopen that app. But Mike asked me, and I sent that to him, and he's like, yeah, man, I'm gonna learn Spanish this year, and I'm gonna listen to the audio while I do 400 meters of lunges every day. And he's like, you in? I'm like, yeah. All right. I'm in. I do need to learn Spanish. But uh yeah, no, I'm interested in more like about, because how you learn, the principles are all the same across whatever field,
Yeah.
like whether it's fitness or learning a language or learning a skill or whatever it is. There's certain principles that apply to everything. So I'm interested in like how did you learn, and like what things did you find? Like, you're fluent now, right? Like you can speak.
Enough. I haven't been keeping up with it great, but like I can hold a good conversation. And it's kind of like fitness, right? Like I can maintain a basic level pretty easy. If I want to get super cut up, I want to get super fluent to be able to talk about, something super in depth. I can get there. Like I know what to do and the time to put in to improve. And yeah, it's so similar to fitness because it seems like something that some people are wired to do, some people are not. And it's not the case because I was terrible at languages in school. I mean, I took languages like the rest of us. I didn't speak a word of anything after high school or college. And when I finally just came across some better methods and applied myself, I started to see results. It's basically built upon comprehensible input. Oh, what is the guy's name? I got to look him up. I think he's a professor out in California. So white guy, he's like a Spanish professor, and he made a YouTube video where he's learning the Arabic over a few months using this method. And it's not an app. The goal is to conversate, right? Like your biggest interest would probably be to speak fluent Spanish, talk to your wife, to flex in front of others. Like it's cool, right? If
Yeah.
you're at a bar, it's cool to start
Yeah.
speaking Spanish. You don't need to worry as much about the grammar. How do I write it and put accents? The first goal is just to be able to speak and
Yeah.
understand. So if you want to have conversations, the best way to do it is live, just like this, and to be having slow conversations in Spanish as opposed to, I mean, probably 80% of America uses Duolingo, right? I've never met anybody who actually learned the language.
Dude, it's really hilarious you say that because I don't know anybody who was like who's fluent or learned a language and you go, so how'd you learn? They're like, oh, I learned off of Duolingo or Rosetta Stone. Like I don't know, I haven't heard of anybody.
I don't know a person, and I've never used them. The YouTube video is called "How to Acquire Any Language."
All right, I got
Um,
it down.
like the guy's name is Jeff Brown. How, if you just type in "How to Acquire Any Language," and so the big thing is about that languages, we acquire them. So the way we teach them in school is so backwards. We didn't
Yeah,
learn English by conjugating verbs. We
no.
didn't, nothing that we do in language class is how we learned our first language. Our brains are wired for language. Like if we listen and hear things and we understand them, we basically repeat them. That's why babies are silent for a while. They're just taking in, taking in, taking in, and eventually they start repeating. And so learning a language is really just like repeating things that you've heard enough times that it becomes second nature. And so at first you can hire really any tutor that you, so like I gave the guy Jeff Brown, I guess, wrote like has a free Google Doc where he explains his method. I just sent it to my uncle in Canada and I was like, just read this and do just what's in here. And he'd never taught anything. He speaks French, but he's never taught anyone French. Like my family up there is absolutely shocked. Like when I visit up there now and we're speaking in French, he's like, yeah, I taught him French. I'm like, yeah, he just taught me. We were
Yeah.
online. And it basically has to do with comprehensible input. So the teacher says things to you slow, like with gestures. I think it's called TPR, total physical response, and they ask you yes or no questions. So like I'd be like, if I was giving you a lesson, I might be like, yo tengo un celular. Tengo un celular. Tú tienes un celular? Sí o no? And at first, all you do is answer yes, no questions. Yes or no. You're just trying to understand. And then little by little, you just start to be able to like repeat these simple phrases. And over time, you just kind of build it out. But it's no grammar, it's no app, like it's live, it's practicing conversations.
Dude, that makes so much sense. That's how kind of that is how Michel Thomas program is too.
Yeah.
His like when he used to teach classes, it would be like that. There was no nothing. It was just everybody sit around in a circle and he would just start talking and like, little slow piece by
Yeah. So
piece.
like, and they don't, and you really don't want to break the language unless it's like an emergency. I
Yeah.
mean, part of the problem, it's probably everyone, but like when I've been actually in language courses, I never find it that productive. And it always, I mean, if you're in like a group class, a bunch of Americans, like basically people start resorting back to English. They go, how do you say, instead of just learning like a simple 3-word phrase to put in front of what they wanted to ask, like they never stick in the language because it's hard. Like if me and you, if I said we're going to do a 20-minute lesson right now, we're not going to speak any English, you'd have to build up some stamina. Like you're not going to want to do it. You're going to want to resort
Yeah.
back. So you got to just like stay in it and really like give your brain a chance to recognize the patterns. And it's really just recognizing patterns. And if you do it with some level of frequency, like even if you did 30 minutes a day, you could probably be fluent in Spanish in 6 months or a year with just 30 minutes a day. Because when your brain starts to realize that it's something that needs to be retained because it's going to use it again, like it starts retaining it. If you do it, if you study for 7 hours one day and then don't do it for a month, it's not going to retain anything. Your brain throws it out. But if it's something that it knows it's going to need again, it starts to prioritize it.
Well, this is why I said everything is everything. Like when I talk to people about fitness, I am like, it's so important. And it's so important for me to be able to teach well. And it's the same thing. I'm like, look, I don't need you. And I always tell people like I'm taking away things as much as possible so that you just repeat this same stuff over and over again every single day. And for in the context of fitness, it's like, hey, I don't want you to worry about all the weeds that people get into with fitness. Oh, my cholesterol, oh, this, what about timing? It's like, stop. I just want you to measure your food 100 times, measure 100 things 100 different times, and just track everything. That's all you're doing. You're not trying to be right. You're not trying to be perfect. All you're doing is putting things on a scale, putting them in the app, and through that repetition, you start to pick up. This is why, like, we can go eat anything anywhere on the planet at any time, and we'll never gain body fat because
Yeah.
we've repeated those things. We're now I use these simple examples.
When I went to Paris, I lost weight. I was there for a summer, and I think that one picture on Instagram, I was like just back from like a summer in Paris,
Yeah,
and yeah, I just lost
credit.
weight. Like I
Yeah,
was walking more because it was Europe, so I was walking like stupid amounts every day, like 20, 30,000 steps, and I just went to Chipotle every day, and I got like a dollar triple chicken bowl. I had a couple scoops of whey, and it's
but
easy.
it's so simple. But and the beautiful thing is like, same thing with the language thing. Is like you'll find out, and you know how Ben says about knee health. He's like, if you haven't, you're not even asking the universe to fix your knees if you haven't done, this repetition 1,000 times. And I use that. I'm like, until you've weighed like 20 different things 1,000 times, you haven't even asked the universe to make fat loss easy for you, And to what your point is, like, if you're not spending 10 minutes, 100 days in a row, you haven't even asked the universe to, be fluent in any language. It's like, and so being a teacher, is this is, something that I'm sure. What do you teach, by the way, or what were you teaching?
I just want to say quickly, I love weighing things as well. I still do it. Like
It's
I
it's the best.
actually enjoy doing it. It for me, it is actually freeing. Like it frees me. I know exactly what I'm eating. Like if I go over, I'm consciously doing it, and I know how much I went over by.
Yeah,
And I really can eyeball probably so much at this point, but for some reason, like it actually just helps me. It lets me know, like, oh, I could fit in this, and I feel great about fitting in this like more calorically dense food because I know I have
yep,
room for it. Like, I
yep.
absolutely love the scale. Brandon Carter is hilarious about that on Instagram. I don't know if you follow him. He
I don't
brings
follow. I know who he is. I don't follow.
oh dude, you should. He's a trip. He brings I don't do this, but he brings his scale to restaurants. He brings his scale to restaurants and weighs out every
Wasted,
single
yeah.
thing he gets. But no, it's
Well,
that's
but you
cool
know
stuff.
what? Again, the context and the perception in your culture, your society influences so heavily. So I tried to make this point frequently. Is like, look, you only believe that weighing things and tracking is difficult because that's what everybody else believes. But like you said, you love it. I'm like, I don't need to weigh anything anymore. I love it because it gives me certainty. So in my normal, we weigh things. It's not a weird
That's
thing.
a big part. It's a big part. It's really, really important to be willing to go against the grain, to look weird, to do something because you want to do it and because it's good for you. It's huge. I mean, my 18-year-old self would have never done all of the things that I do now. Some of the exercises I do in the gym, I would have been too self-conscious. Now, I mean, half the stuff Knees Over Toes Guy does looks absolutely crazy. I mean, you have to have like that self-confidence to be like, oh, I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Like, I could care less what other people think. And now it's at the point where like people will come up to you and they're like, oh, I follow Knees Over Toes Guy.
Yeah.
Like, wow, you're really strong in those deep squats. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't care about what other people think. You actually, you really actually level up a lot. Like for whatever reason, like people actually appreciate that about you in time. They're like, wow, I love that David just does what he thinks, like what he wants to do. He doesn't care who in the room is looking at him or what he's
Yeah.
doing.
Well, That's so important. And whenever, when in my teaching environments, which is whether it's the weight room or the kitchen or on social media or with a client, I'm like, I always try to make a point of, and I actually learned this from listening to Michel Thomas. He goes, the first thing he says is to make the learning environment so safe and like remove all of the pressure. Like, there's no pressure to be right here. There's no pressure to try to look a certain way. Like, he creates the safest learning environment, and which is like you said, like it's so hard to be like, I'm going to do something that isn't normal and it's outside of my comfort zone and feel safe. So, like I'm sure
That's so true for languages. I hadn't even thought of it for that. It's so important. That's part of the reason why people do things like Duolingo, because
it's safe.
it's nerve-wracking to walk up to a person and speak a language that is not native to you. You will make mistakes. I still make mistakes. If I communicate my message, they understand it, and we have a conversation, it's okay. But it's for many people just ever, I mean, they'll study it for years, like on an app, but they will never, I mean, a person could come up to them and doesn't speak any English and ask them something in Spanish, and they won't even be like, I don't speak Spanish. You have to be willing to kind of fail and make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's how we learn. The first time you tried to get abs, you didn't get them. It's because you failed all those times and learned, you then were able to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, and you miss out on so much feedback because you chose not to. So like, when sometimes a person will be like, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to go on this trip or whatever. And so let's start after that." And I tell them like, "Look, I want my clients to work with me when they're going on trips, when they're having, busy time at work, because they're going to be able to bring me all of their mistakes and I'm going to be able to give them feedback. And the learning that you do it from that is what actually makes you able to do it in any scenario. But if you're like, okay, I'm not going to do it because, I'm not going to do it correctly, or I'm going to make mistakes. You just missed out on, everything.
Yeah.
And I'm still the same way as far as I'm much better. Like I'll speak to people in Spanish, even though I know I'm like, it probably sounds not even close, but we're gonna do it anyway. But for
Yeah.
a long time, I was super self-conscious of like, oh, I want to learn Spanish, but I'm not gonna speak to this person in Spanish. I'll just say, yeah, I don't speak Spanish,
Yeah.
to avoid that, that mistake or looking silly or whatever. And it's because it didn't feel safe.
Yeah. And that like spot where you don't feel safe, like it really is like where life happens. I mean, that really is where the magic happens. Because the first time at the bar I ran into someone, I might have failed, but then the fourth or fifth time I'm riding the bike and I'm having a conversation in Spanish, my friends are there. They're in shock, right? Like they don't understand a word that's being said. Now
Yeah.
they're wishing like maybe I should have put myself out there and
Yeah.
went for it.
Yeah. No, it's super dope. Tell me a little bit more about teaching, man, because that's so important to me. I stopped teaching. We had kids programs and whatnot, but I didn't do that for a while. And what I've come to realize, like I've done a lot of work on myself over the last, I mean, forever, but specifically over the last 6 years. And what I've found is like a lot of my bad habits, or I don't want to say bad, because that's us placing a judgment on them. A lot of my habits that I use to protect myself and keep myself safe stemmed from my childhood of like, I didn't feel safe to express myself or ask for help or look like I didn't know what I was doing. And that's just, I mean, I see this is something that I see with adults all the time. Like, I'm like, look, to be able to ask another person for help and not feel, especially as a man, like, we have so much bullshit around like being able to express our opinion or like our feelings and like not be judged because we're constantly judging ourselves. Like, how do what are some of the things that you use with your kids or with the young people, um to let them know, like, hey, you no one's expecting you to do like be anything or whatever. It's completely safe. Like, ask for help. Like, it's okay. Like, that's what we're here for. Like, what kind of, you know,
Yeah, yeah. I work at a really young age for the most part, primarily first graders. It's my specialty, and they're interesting at that age. They're actually still in that bubble where they're not afraid of looking silly, asking for help. They actually like to spend time with adults and teachers. They run towards all of that kind of adult attention. It's really kind of a beautiful age, before they get like too cool for not only teachers but their parents, like all adults. And for me, it was just a chance to catch them early, to get students so that they're not behind and having to catch up, to really put them on.
undoing a lot of, yeah, like
Yeah,
undoing a lot of, the conditioning or the habits or the beliefs. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, I did. I wasn't always in education. I majored in econ in college. I was in auditing briefly when I graduated. Then I was working in investment consulting. And I just kind of looked up one day and was like, this is not like my highest calling. Like, this isn't very purposeful work for me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what led me into teaching.
Yeah. No, dude, props. I have a lot of respect and admiration for people involved in teaching, but also involved in, civil service, because, that's you're dealing with a lot of broken adults. And you're trying to create environments and structures to just help people feel better and give people the opportunity to, I mean, at the end of the day, to live a good life. Like, that's what you're doing. And so I always have, a lot of respect and admiration for people involved in that. Because it takes a lot.
Yeah, definitely. You're trying to break down a lot of kind of generational cyclical issues. It's
Yeah.
true in education, health, you name it. Habits unfortunately get passed down, good habits and bad habits. And so it takes a lot to really make changes there.
So do you I mean, is health part of the conversation you have with kids, or not really?
It's not honestly at that age. Um, I mean, shoot, they're in like the healthiest,
Yeah.
healthiest that
Phase
there
of
was a
their
kid
life.
this summer. It blew my mind. It's really, I mean, I think Ben talks about kind of the abilities that we lose as we get older, like as kids, like the way we sit and play, like all of these, we're in a deep squat, like it's natural. Man, this kid this summer did a one arm back bridge. He had a back bridge and he only had one arm on the ground. Like, I went to the gym and tried to do it. It was like not even close. I can do a two-arm one.
Even
They
that's impressive.
dude, it's really impressive. So if anything, it's like what happens after the like age 6 or 7 when it's like play is not acceptable and now they just like see it all the time. They're not moving. But I mean, I think the best thing I can do is kind of just set a good example. I mean, it's kind of more about like what your actions are and the example you're setting is more likely. I mean, same thing, as in parenting, like kids will notice kind of what you do and don't do. So at the same time, if I'm sitting down with them, I'm probably drinking coffee or water. Like, I'm not eating Takis and hot Cheetos. And so even that too, like, we have an ability to influence kids like that. And unfortunately, a lot of adults that work with kids, they are eating all of those things themselves. Like, they are, it's not, no one meal or food is bad, but like, they are ordering in lunch every single day and eating all kinds of crazy stuff. And so then by the age of 6, 7, kids are like, oh, this is what adults eat. This is what people eat.
Yeah.
I want to eat that versus like, you're having an apple with some raspberries. I'm like, oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
could, I could eat that too. So
Yeah.
just kind of setting the habits and examples for them.
That's a very good point. And yeah, and that's kind of like what I, you know, because a lot of times people ask, oh, about my kids and blah blah blah. I'm like, your kids, they're watching what you're doing. Like, you could tell them whatever you want. Better use of your time and energy is to set the example, because they're
Oh,
always watching.
oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if I had kids just going to the gym alone. I mean, just like you see with Ben and all these people that are kind of raising kids in the social media spotlight. I mean, I can't imagine how normalized that'll be for their kids. Like, it's a real blessing for them that this is like a normal thing that one does.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's why like guys will be like, "Oh, just wait till you have kids." I'm like, I can't wait to have kids because I'm gonna set the exact like again, it goes back to this whole thing of like your perception of your reality is generally you just accept the perception of reality around you. And I think one of the things that was very helpful to me was I always had this weird thing of like whatever everybody else is thinking or doing, I'm like, none of them have the result, none of them have the thing that I want. So I can't be that. So I need to think something completely opposite. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I, I think I don't think it's like to me, I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna gain 20 pounds because my wife is pregnant. Like to me, that's a silly thing. I get it, but I'm like, it's
Yeah.
silly to me. Like, why would that's not gonna happen? Plus, I'm far too vain to allow that to happen.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean it come the like personal accountability and responsibility piece of it is really like liberating and freeing when you stop like looking for an excuse for something and like you start to realize that like the majority of the things in your life are really directly in your control, and your body is the clearest example of that. Like it is, the ball is in your court, and it's not, genetics. Like genetics might prevent you from, winning a bodybuilding competition. Like you might not be the most jacked freak in the world, but like any person can get into, I mean, you can basically look like a pro athlete. I mean, you could look better than some pro athletes. Actually, I'm an Orioles fan. I was disappointed to see this picture of, I won't even name it, but one of our star players. It's like 23. And it was a picture of him this off season, and I'm like, all right, he actually must be a genetic freak because he's a beast at baseball. And like, I mean, there's barely any muscle definition on his body. You see that sometimes with athletes. John Wall is a good example of him. Like, I'm a Wizards fan. John Wall was like pretty lean. Like in college, I've seen some pictures of him. He had abs. He hasn't had abs in 10 years, and he's still faster and jumps higher than like 99% of
Yeah.
people on the planet. And so
Yeah.
like that's genetics, but just like getting into like good, healthy aesthetic shape is, I mean, that's possible for nearly everyone.
I,
Everyone.
I I agree for everyone, I think. And you know what? I mean, that's the thing of like really questioning what you want versus just taking like is this whole social media thing for sure, but even before social media, just general media, general perceptions, like you don't need to lift 500 pounds. That's just something that you see on social media all the time because nobody's posting their 315-pound deadlift. But guess what? You don't you don't even need to you don't even need to deadlift to
You
look
don't.
fucking amazing.
I would be embarrassed to tell you what my top lifts are and pretty much any lift across the board. It would actually shock people. Maybe that would then people would be like, okay, you can just get into good shape because I'd be weaker than so many people who kind of, to the point that chase like, I don't know, powerlifting or bodybuilding, like it is good. It's super important to build strength. I mean, it really is critical, but you don't have to be able to lift like Herculean amounts to like put on a decent amount of like lean body mass.
No, and that's a really good point. And if I mean, I would say just go ahead and share it because I have
And
a very
which
important
lift,
point on
which
this.
lift do you want? Which lift do you want to know?
Hey, whatever.
Oh
I
man.
have a very important point on this though, because you're saying that, and we have this misconception because of social media, and this is the same thing for what the ideal relationship is supposed to look like, or the body and what you need to do and making money, and like everyone's living this. I posted this story on my thing I think yesterday, but it was like it's the handsome Squidward,
Yeah.
and then the Squidward where he's like all melted, or like
Yeah.
SpongeBob, but it was like the handsome Squid. This is what people show on social media, but inside this is what they feel like, and so you
Yeah.
can't it's a distortion of what reality really is. But yeah, share your numbers. I have
Yeah,
some.
it really is. I will. It really is about like chasing what you care about. That was one thing I think is really appealing with Greg's message. Is like you don't desire to like be a power lifter. You desire to look good on the beach or at whatever it is. You want to look a certain way. I've seen a lot of. I mean, I have a lot of friends who just kind of like chase these lifts because the lift is like everything, and like the lift is important, but not if it requires you to put on 35 pounds of body fat, right? So that you can like get a lift at like, at a much heavier weight where you're no longer lean. But man, where to start? So I'll start with my only semi-impressive lifts, which are like body weight lifts. Like at my strongest, I think I've like one rep max like 100 pounds on a weighted chin up in dips. Those are like the only things that I could even be like somewhat proud about because most people can't, add on crazy weight on a chin up or a dip. But man, like bench press, my max is probably like 185. Deadlift is probably just under 300 pounds. I don't even know what it would be on like a half squat that most people do because I really only do bench squats now. But even on that, I probably never put on more than like 165. So I mean, just nothing that is like, I mean, all of those lifts are attainable by all men on the planet. It's like the goal is to look good, like get your diet in shape, and like you will be just fine.
So then let me give the context to this. So first of all, 100-pound weighted chin up, that's fucking massive. So that is a huge lift. So just for context, like people don't.
The power of Kino body. He's into like very non-traditional key lifts where other people it's like squat or deadlift. He's like, dude, if you can chin up 100 pounds, you're gonna be jacked, which is pretty much true because your body weight ratio to that is hard.
And then your 300-pound deadlift. Here's the thing. Once you and what do you weigh right now?
Right now I've been lean bulking for a while. I'm probably like in the low 160s.
Okay, so
Tiny.
yeah, so
And
so
I'm like 5'11, almost six
oh,
feet.
so we're like the same. I'm 5'11", 155.
Yeah.
So basically, once you can, and by the way, 300 pounds is attainable by pretty much anyone within for any man within their first 6 months. If you
Yeah.
just start
And
deadlifting.
I've only recently started as I've transitioned away from Greg's programs into like more full body stuff. And I've started making a lot more results because like his program wasn't perfect. He just has a lot of stuff right, but there's
Yeah,
probably better stuff out
and
there.
and that's what you need. Like it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs the basics. And within a year of like consistent with good technique and a little bit of coaching, any man can deadlift 405. Like any fucking person.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, once you deadlift 250, 300 with good technique and it's easy for you and you're not forcing it, you're already strong enough to do 99.9% of things that you would ever need to do as a human being.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
so like there's this skewed perception of what strong is, and it's not on the mark. I think this is the same as like in language, uh, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like you probably only need to know a few hundred words,
Yeah. Yeah.
and now you can have a conversation. But in our head, we're like, oh my God, a whole language. There's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of words.
Exactly. It's all contextual. Like at a bar, I'll have lots of things to talk about that are interesting. The game, like current events. I can't discuss to you like 1700, like
Yeah,
European literature. And
economics.
like I don't have the vocabulary. I could get it if I needed it, right, over time, but like you have just kind of the most important things down. Like there's certain, phrases and things that are just going to come up in any conversation. So if you have those down, like you can pick up, you understood the first 9 words. If they use one you didn't understand, you'll still be able to follow the flow of the conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely.
Dude, and same thing with the other lifts, like and I've been biased against the bench press, so I don't think it's very important. I'm more in like I totally agree with Greg. Like I've always loved the overhead press, and if you really want to
Oh
bench
yeah,
press the
I love
incline,
the overhead.
dude,
Love the overhead.
And once you're benching 185 with control and good form, it's like, okay, you're nothing else. You don't need to bench press 225. And then squat, same thing. Like, sure, I'll tell you, squatting with 3 plates and you hear the plates jingling, that's a great feeling, especially us being, on the smaller side.
And you do that like ATG style.
No, which 1 second. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You just all right?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. I'm actually in one of our Airbnbs in between, so they're gonna clean out some stuff. But
We'll have to talk about money. That's the other the only missing link we haven't discussed.
hey, I was gonna say we got like another 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
We could dive
What,
in.
what were you gonna say before that? About the like the depth of squat.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say is doing 160, and again, it's all contextual. 165 full calf on hamstring squat with control, you're an animal. Like that's that unbelievable strength to be able to control that at that, at that depth of those joints, right? And so at that point, like people think, oh, blah blah blah, but no, that's super strong and that's really attainable. You know,
Yeah.
You have to. These numbers are all random, and that's actually a great segue into finance too, because
Yeah.
here's what I go with this. People go, the whole world is all about, oh, more. And you go, if you look at anything online, oh, how to scale to 6-figure months, how to make 7 figures a year. And that's all you see. So it's the same as seeing how to get your deadlift to 500 pounds. And then what I learned from, and I chased all those things, not knowing this, but here's the thing. It's like, I learned this from one of my mentors, Nick Peterson, is like, you have to create your solvable problem, which starts with, what do you actually want? We don't ever think about this.
Right.
How much money is required for me to fund my priorities in life? And actually assigning the values. And then I come to find out, oh, sure, I can have everything I want that I want, not what social media says I want, with $9,000 a month.
Yeah.
Why would I chase more if that completely closes the gap?
Yeah.
And
And that's
so
in California. It'd probably be less in other places.
that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, unless you define the variables, you're just playing a game of inevitable exhaustion and burnout.
Yeah.
I talked to one of my former clients and good friends. He's down in he's a volleyball coach down in Florida, D1, and he was asking me about some financial things and questions. And I asked him questions like, how much you're making, how much you actually need, and blah blah blah. And turns out the gap that he needed to close was already closed with a few small changes in like where he was spending his time. Like but in his head, he needed to create some business, make, $20,000 a month and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, if you just do this and this, a great example of this is, this was a guy, he was saying like, he wants to spend every evening with his kids for dinner and spend more time with them. And so his solution to that was and his office was like, an hour away. And his solution was, I'm going to hire an assistant, blah, 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 and they'll be able to do X, Y, Z. And then after a conversation, it was like, well, your new assistant plus the time it will take them to train and what's going to cost you in payroll, that's going to cost you, $4,000 a month in payroll. It's going to cost you all this time to train him. But you could just get an office 10 minutes away from your house. It's going to cost you 2,000 more in rent. So now you're still saving 2,000, and now you can be home when you want. And now you're not driving 2 hours back and forth. You got your time back. You didn't need to spend 4,000 on training. And now you got that time back to spending with your kids. You just gained, 14 hours a week. And so that's my thinking on finances. And it's the same across the board. Like, figure out what is your solvable problem, define the variables, and recapture and reallocate resources. Like, you don't need to do more, which is what we're pulled toward and kind of pushed towards if we don't think for ourselves. So,
Yep.
But yeah. What about you? What's your thoughts on that?
Man, I was in like another one of my phases. I still enjoy this stuff. Sometimes you just like learn enough about something and then you just like you don't have to like actively pursue it. You have like a good base of knowledge, so you just kind of set it and forget it. I feel like I'm almost like getting there with like the knees over toes stuff. I used to like watch every single video and do every single exercise. Now I'm like, I got it. I'm like, I can kind of put this on autopilot. I was really interested in the early retirement movement back before I kind of found like purpose in work. I was like, yeah, I cannot be in this cubicle forever. Like, I got to get out of here. And so just started
Fire movement.
The fire movement.
You know
Yeah, all that.
Millennial Money Man.
Yep. I follow his stuff.
He's a former client of mine, really good friend of mine too.
Nice. Yeah, I read his stuff. Mr. Money Mustache was the big one first. He was the biggest for a long time.
Yeah.
But just figuring out, how do I stack up enough money so that I don't have to do this anymore? And if I do work, I do it because I want to work on my terms. And that's powerful because like people will say like their job. I'm like, okay, well, if you had several million in the bank, you did not have to go to work, would you go? And they're like, well, of course not. I'm like, okay, so you're doing it. I mean, because you have to do it, which, is not liberating and not freeing. So, I really just, and the power of compound interest is just hugely important. Like in these early years, like what we do just has an outsized impact on like what we'll have later. I mean, you can put away, like if you can save and put away 100,000 in your 20s, like in your 60s, like it's 7 figures. And that's without adding anything to it ever if it's invested. So you gotta learn about how to like put money in the stock market. It's not that complicated either when you do a little research into index funds and things like that. So I definitely am still like subscribed to that stuff, like trying to stack up money so that I can really do like only do things because I want to do them, when I'm 40 or when I'm 45. Like, shoot, I would love to be like, not required to work at all when I have young kids, that you can just kind of be there all the time. I mean, if you think about how we raise kids today, it's crazy. I mean, they spend more time with their teachers than they do with their parents. I mean, it's like, it's a sad reality, but if you kind of make it, if you research this stuff and you make some different choices, like you can kind of get off that path. And I really looked at it the same way you did in terms of like, I'm looking around at people, the average adult, they don't look happy. I wouldn't be happy doing what they're doing. So therefore I can't do the same things that they're doing, spend money in the same way and expect different outcomes. And so, people will be like, oh, the fire movement, early retirement movement is crazy. And I'm like, kind of, but it's also crazy to just work for the rest of your life and never be able to really pursue your interests. So, it's kind of like the same thing with the fence. I mean, having your money in check is freeing. It's really, really liberating so that you can kind of follow passions and interests.
Dude, that's so important. I mean, I grew in Punjabi culture, Indian, I'm sure it's same in many different cultures, but it's all about, oh, you need to be successful, you need to make money, you need to do this, you need to do more. And I'm like, but why? Because all I want, and I subscribed to these beliefs that were not mine for a long time. Yeah. And you really that's why I always say, like, really slow down and allow what you want to come up. And so for a long time, I was just doing stuff. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Because if I ask myself, what do I really want? I want to spend time with my wife. I want to go, nice places and experience the world. And even just, there's so many places locally. I want to I want to work out. I want to spend time with my clients. I want to be able to have this conversation, and be with people. And do I need to scale a business to 7 figures to do so? The answer to that is no. Could you? Is that like, I'm not saying, oh, you shouldn't do that or that's bad, because like any type of condemnation magnifies the darkness. So that's an important thing too, is like people are so busy condemning things versus just, what do I want? What would make me feel good? And then reverse engineer that. And the beautiful thing that I think is, and again, it goes all the things we talked about. You find out how close you really are, or in a lot of cases that you're already there if you make some simple tweaks.
Yeah.
And like life could be so much easier and smoother, but we
So
just
yeah, it really is like a lack of like information, like having the right knowledge in front of you, because it's not usually working harder. It might be working hard, but it's not working harder. Like when I got into that stuff and learned about house hacking, it's like I bought a 3 unit house, and now I basically just like, instead of buying a random single family house or like something else where it wouldn't have really set me up to do anything spectacular financially, now I basically live rent free. You'll move out, the thing will cash. Like just that one change will probably
game
that'd probably
changer.
be like $500,000, probably more than that by the time a property is appreciated over a lifetime. But just taking like your biggest expense, housing, like basically off the table, I mean, allows you to just do differentials. And so it's just those little, and that's not really working harder. It was kind of just doing some upfront kind of research on the smartest way to go about like cracking something, whether it's fitness or languages. Like there's smarter ways to do things that are less painful and more direct.
Dude, that's a beautiful thing. And that's kind of my thesis or quest in everything, is to simplify. And like I always tell people, I'm like, you can have everything you want. And I've been writing this a lot, is like, then just like in the stories, then you live happily ever after. But like until you just like think that that's possible and decide I'm gonna find out about that, you're gonna be in this hamster wheel. And we all know people who are very successful, right? On paper, broken health, broken relationships, just
Sometimes broke, unfortunately.
and broke.
I mean, I know people making, a quarter million a year that are in debt. It's crazy. Like it's absolutely crazy to me. I'm like, why don't you save it? You know what I mean? Like we're very focused. Building income is great. I mean, it is absolutely important and great. But like, as you know, with like if your lifestyle creeps the whole way, you never end up retaining more of it. And so
No.
like you can never walk away. And if anything, it gets more dangerous when you haven't set yourself up with security, because you build out all these expenses, you're used to spending money, you have all these liabilities. So if something happens and God forbid you lose that high paying job, like all of a sudden it comes crashing down real quick.
And man, and that's why I repeat, everything is everything. You know what the benefit of getting strong is, as humanly possible, is you get away with a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
If my strength bank account, and that's why I changed it from San Jose Barbell to the strength method, because I wasn't just talking about physical strength. Strength in, strength, financial strength, emotional strength, spiritual strength, and of course physical strength. The more financially strong I am, the less likely anything can really like disturb me or harm me. Same thing, like my strength bank account is so high,
Yep.
things are not like, I can get away with so much more than someone who's poor in strength, and
Yeah.
so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think when you see the parallels in every area, you can begin to, like, you're not doing different things, you're just doing the same thing in different areas of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Like, what things are you looking forward to? What are you up to? And I think we might have to do another one of these.
Yeah, I would love to. It was therapeutic. I've never done one of these before. Never.
Well, and the reason I like to talk to people, um, we always see, and there's good things that celebrities say and influencers and blah blah blah, but there's so much wisdom and value and things that we can learn from people who aren't, oh, I'm a New York Times bestseller, blah, blah, all well and good, nothing wrong with that. But I always think about this. I'm like, I'm looking outside. There's this pole that, you know, has all the electrical wires and stuff, and there's screws and things. And I'm like, there's some guy who decided I'm gonna make a company that sells these poles. Nobody knows about this guy, and we probably never will. But he's probably somewhere. I'm making it up, but he might just be living a nice, wonderful life with his family, unknown. And these people are all around us, but we never take the time to talk to them or see them.
Social media it's a blessing if you use it correctly. It really is. I mean, it's how I've learned, like, I mean, between the internet and social media, I mean, just fitness, I mean, you name it, like it's there. If you follow the right kind of influences, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, 100%. So what do you got going on? What are you looking forward to?
Man, what to have going on? Busy with work. It's a cold time of year out here as well.
You would laugh. It's like people are like bundled up out here. It's sunny and like I think it might be like 50 degrees, 60 degrees. Yeah, 50 degrees. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm cold.
Yeah, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. Too many people, like, for whatever reason, we tend to stay like where we were planted, like we just wherever we started, like we tend to just stay there. But there's definitely warmer, friendlier places to get to. But not too much. Got a little cabin getaway coming up. Um, looking forward to that. But just focused. I feel like I'm more like focused in my life the last few years, just been kind of really, really locked in, like cutting down. COVID was a big, I don't know if you felt the same way, but it was a big kind of inflection point. I mean, before that, like going out every weekend, drinking, just having fun, living a normal life. COVID came with such a hard stop. You couldn't do it. That, like, when it opened back up, I was just like a different person. I didn't even know how to cook before COVID. At all I did was eat out. So, like, if I went to Chipotle, I was good. But other than that, I was probably not going to be good. And I mean, just never looked back. So, like, when things open back up, like, oh, still go out and have drinks sometimes now, but just kind of took that time to just focus on, like, what do I want to do, and like what habits do I have to put in place.
100%, man. I totally agree. Perspective. Some people thought it was terrible, and other people found benefit and improved their lives. So
Yeah.
well, dope, man. I'm looking forward to sharing this and continued success to you. And like I said, we'll do this again.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And like I said, I mean, I've been paying attention to nutrition stuff for a long time, but I get a lot of value out of the stuff you post. There's definitely some brilliant simplicity to it.
I appreciate that. I do.
On what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing.